Do you ever feel like a puppet on the string of your emotions? This episode of the Morpheus Intelligence Update Podcast is for you. You will learn how to cut those strings and leverage your emotions to work for you instead.
In today's session, we are going to be focusing on emotions, leveraging emotions. Are your emotions working for or against you? What's going on with the emotions? That's what we're going to focus in on today. We're going to start with this, where we are going to be looking at what. As we explore this idea of what exactly is emotional resilience, we're going to be jumping into a few very specific elements, but I want to start with a very basic definition of emotional resilience. Emotional resilience is about integrating ourselves. This is an integration between our minds, our hearts, our guts, our emotions, which we experience all over our body, our senses. This is one of the things that I believe in so strongly, is that we need integration in all our parts. Very often we're kind of almost taught that all we must do is rely on our minds. We mustn't rely on anything else. Or all we must do is rely on our gut feel. And the reality is that we as human beings have an integrated system, and that system is integrated for a reason. And so the ability to be emotional resilient is the ability to leverage all of who we are in our day-to-day lives. And to give you some examples of that, it's maybe just to go into that emotional resilience is understanding what emotions are and aren't. So let's start off with what they are. Emotions are natural and valid. In fact, if you don't experience emotions, I don't know that you are fully human. And so the whole idea is it's completely natural to have emotions, what we call so-called positive and negative emotions. I'll come back to that a bit later on. But all of that emotional experience is a valid human experience. And a second thing about what emotions are is emotions are temporary and transitional. And so once we're experiencing an emotion, it is not the entire truth. It is something temporary, it's something transitional. I like to view it as a light on a dashboard, is something on the dashboard. It could be, is the oil light on? Is the fuel gauge up? That's what we're looking at, but they can change because we can add oil or we can drive far and the fuel can drop. We can use up some of that fuel. So they're always in flux. They're always changing. And so that's our second point here. The third point is, and this is the one that I think a lot of people miss, is they are informative and useful. Emotions are informative and useful. And I think this is, again, the dashboard example, is they're indicators of something that's going on. And they could be very useful to be aware of what those things are that are actually going on. Now, what are emotions not? So emotional resilience is not only accepting what emotions are, it's also accepting what they're not. And so the first thing is to be aware that emotions are not weakness or bad. In fact, they are neither good nor bad. Emotions just are. And so to have emotions is not a sign of weakness. This whole idea of emotions are either good or bad is also a misnomer. In fact, if you suppress so-called negative emotions, you're actually going to suppress your positive emotions too. Psychologists are very clear that it's one part of us, and if you numb one part, you're numbing it all. So if you numb your experience of pain, you're actually numbing your experience of joy. If you numb your experience of unhappiness, you will numb your experience of happiness. And so these things actually work together, and we need to be very aware that it's not weakness, it's not good, it's not bad. They just are, and we can work with them. The next thing about what they're not is they are not facts or truth. So just as much as they provide us incredible information, insights, and are useful, the emotions are not ultimate facts. So if somebody, for example, doesn't greet you, it doesn't mean they don't like you. It could mean something else, But the fact that you experience it as something emotional, that's valid, true, acceptable, but it might not be the ultimate truth or the ultimate fact. So let me give you a car example. If your oil light comes on your car, it could mean one of a few things. It could mean that your engine is about to stop working. It could be that serious. But it could also be that you just forgot to top up the oil. It could also be that it's telling you that you've got an oil leak. It could also be that it's telling you that the oil sensor on your engine has malfunctioned. So, just because the oil light comes on, it doesn't give you the truth or the whole picture. And it's very much the same with our emotions. In fact, I had an experience just yesterday where I felt quite emotional about something, and I went into it, and eventually I realized that the person who triggered the emotion, they had done absolutely nothing wrong. It was actually a reminder of something that I hadn't dealt with about me. And so I had to kind of go, oh, okay. So what I'm feeling doesn't mean this. It actually means something else. And I think that's a critical thing. And then finally, emotions are not an instruction to act. I think we see that happening in road rage is a great example of people who are acting out an emotion invalidly. It's not actually an instruction to act. That's not really what we're talking about when we're talking about emotions. And so really, we want to be able to build our resilience with this understanding of what exactly our emotions are and what exactly they aren't. And that's going to feed into a much more full experience of life. Now, we have some polls that we're going to run during this session, but we're going to not use the chat this time. We're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to use something called AHA Slides. And so I'm going to share something for you on AHA Slides. You can feel free to use your phone to either scan the QR code or to simply go to ahaslides.com/MIU, which stands for Morpheus Intelligence Update. So ahaslides.com/MIU, and I'm going to, in a moment, switch to the first poll that we're going to be running. The first poll is going to be this. Which of these are the most insightful for you? And I'm going to list the 6 that I've just listed. Which of these is most insightful for you? Emotions being valid, natural and valid, temporary and transitional, informative and useful, or not? Weaknesses or bad, facts or truth, or instructions to act. So feel free to put in your answers and which of these are the most insightful for you. Now, I think I'm allowing each person to answer twice, by the way. So to put in 2 answers if you want to. Okay. So the one that's winning at the moment is the informative and useful. And then we've got a few around natural and valid, not being facts and truth. Those 2 equally high as well. Okay. Oh, quite an interesting spread, actually. The second question that we are asking is, why do we need emotional awareness. I do feel kind of weird with this guy looking over my shoulder here, you know. Anyway, why do we need emotional awareness is the next topic we're going to be covering. So let's have a look at this. The first thing is that emotions make us human. Emotions make us human. So we need to be very, very aware around our emotions because they're a sign that we're human. And I'm going to take it a step further. If you're a leader and you are trying to suppress and avoid all emotion, you're actually trying to communicate to your people that you influence that you have no emotions and therefore are not human. And people do not like following machines. They like following people. And so if you want to, one of the things is allowing people to see some emotion in you is actually very healthy. It makes you human and it makes you more easy to follow and more approachable. Because if people feel that you are this machine, how do they approach you if they feel like they are very human? The second thing is that emotions keep us alive. You know, we've all heard of fight, flight, and freeze. These things are survival mechanisms that certain situations we have these extreme overwhelm of fear or whatever it might be, and it's actually going to stimulate a survival mechanism. And I think we're aware that, you know, there's certain scenarios where your best chance of survival is to freeze. There are other scenarios where the best chance of survival is to run away, which is the flight, or other scenarios where actually the best chance of a survival is to actually attack, stand your ground, be the alpha. And so we see these variety of things. So emotions keep us alive. The third thing is, and I've already mentioned this, is that emotions provide information. And the kind of information that it provides is mainly, in my opinion, in two areas. The first is they let us know that there's something important happening. And that we don't know what that might be. They don't give us the truth. Even when we're observing emotions in other people, even if we can recognize the emotion, we cannot make assumptions about what's behind it because we're actually quite complex as human beings. So the first information that it provides us is that there's something important happening. The second bit is that it might also be alerting us to old emotions that have never been processed. Now, I know this is kind of a bit tricky, a little bit interesting, but basically what happens is when we have suppressed an emotion, it sort of tends to get stored somewhere, maybe in the body. A lot of people would believe that. I also think that that's true. And then they're stored in the body, and then every now and then something happens that triggers the old emotion. It's got very little to do with the current situation. And so sometimes having an emotional reaction to something is actually informing us of some undealt with emotion, unexpressed emotion that's sitting in our being somewhere. Perhaps because of a survival mechanism where we suppressed it. So it's not even bad that we did that, but it might no longer be useful. And that might be an important thing. And then finally, because of what I've just said about it's telling us there's something important going on, and it could even be informing us that there's something we haven't processed, is that effectively emotions invite reflection. They invite reflection. And this is why we need emotional awareness. And so we want to be self-aware, we want to grow, we want sometimes healing and freedom from old emotions. And it's the emotional awareness that will give us that. The next question that we're going to be looking at and exploring is the question of emotional resilience. Who needs it? Who needs emotional resilience? This is, to me, a very interesting, simple little question with maybe a slightly more complex answer. So I'm just going to run through a list here, and then I'm going to run a little poll about this list. And so who needs emotional resilience? Anybody who is invalidating their emotional experience. What do I mean by that? Well, every time we go, I'm not allowed to feel this. I'm not allowed to have this emotion. I'm not allowed to have this fear. I'm not allowed to have this anger. Every time we're doing that, we're invalidating our emotions. And anybody who is doing that needs to grow emotional resilience. The second one is when people are ignorant of their feelings. Anybody who is ignorant of what they're feeling, what's actually going on, needs to build their emotional resilience. And so that would be the second case. The third one is anyone who's suppressing their emotions. Now, that's often linked to the first one of invalidating. We then, because we invalidate, we suppress, but sometimes we suppress because we just don't. We can't face it at that point. So anytime we're suppressing our emotion, we need to be building our emotional resilience. The fourth one is if ever we are driven or in fact controlled by our emotional experience. And so the road rage example was one example, but sometimes it's something bad happens, something negative happens, we have a negative experience, and then we're paralyzed for a week. That would suggest that we're actually controlled by the emotion. We're not able to just tune into it and then work with it. And just to be clear, tragic things happen and mourning is appropriate. I'm not suggesting that mourning is inappropriate. I'm just saying that there are times when we find that people are so overwhelmed or dominated by their emotions that they fail to function in everyday life. And of course, depression is a whole nother subject. I'm not going to get into that, and certainly I've had my fair share of depression, so I'm not judging that. But I'm just saying that sometimes when we are controlled by our emotions, we're constantly up and down because of our emotions. That could be an indicator that we need to be more resilient. And now, those are kind of the negatives. Let me give you one last one that's a positive. We need to be emotionally resilient if we want to be fully alive, because our lives include emotions. And if we are not emotionally resilient, if we're not embracing that we have an emotional part of our lives, then we are actually not going to be able to be fully alive. And so this is actually, to me, a really, really big one. So what we're going to do is we're going to have another look at a poll. And this time, the poll is going to be, let me just share the screen. And so the poll this time is going to be around which of these is most true of you. Now, just remember that this product doesn't allow me in any way to see who's responding with what. I should be really, really clear about that. I can only see the average answers. I have no idea. It's completely anonymous to any of you who are logged into ahaslides.com/MIU. And so the 5 things I've just mentioned, which of these is most true of you? And I think I'm allowing 2 per person. Okay, lots of people wanting to be fully alive. Invalidation is the next high. Suppression is the next one. And then controlled or driven. And we've got nobody who's putting in, I'm ignorant of my feelings. Very interesting. Quite an emotionally aware group. Want to be fully alive is the biggest one by far. Isn't that interesting? So lovely little piece of information coming out from you. Thank you very much. I think that's going to be everybody. We've had 9 people who voted. Oh, there comes another one in. So now we can see being fully alive has gone up to 45%. Okay, very interesting ratio. I think we've got 10 voters in now, so that's why it's come out like that. All right, thank you very much. That's why the numbers are so round. Our next topic is around when. When do we need emotional awareness? When do we need emotional awareness? This one is actually quite simple, quite straightforward, because for me, primarily, there are two primary whens that I'm going to answer now. Obviously, there's a lot more than this, but I'm going to just focus in on two. And the two that I'm going to focus in are this. The first time that we need this is in the moment. We need emotional awareness in the moment as it's happening. We need to be emotionally aware, and so we want to be kind of aware. Oh, I'm experiencing something emotional. And this little story I told you of something I experienced last night, it was so interesting because as I became aware of it, I then kind of went, oh, what's going on? And then I went, oh, and then the second one started to kick in afterwards. And the second when is when we are no longer dominated by what we're feeling, it's a great time to reflect and even take action. So let me give you a specific example about this. If we, for example, are emotionally triggered by an email we just received, and we've all had this, and we've all typed that flame answer, and that is when we need to be aware, oh, hang on, I am experiencing some incredible emotions right now. And there's this kind of a saying in virtual leadership and virtual team leadership that says, when you are about to hit send and it's about something that has triggered you, wait for at least an hour, if not a day, before you hit send. And almost guaranteed you're going to completely change that email once you are out of the emotions. And so it's very, very interesting how we can actually be really triggered in the moment, and we need to be aware, oh, I'm experiencing something emotional, but then afterwards we can take actions. So it doesn't mean that because you're no longer triggered that there isn't an action to take. And I'll give you a simple example. Somebody does something in a meeting that was maybe inappropriate, it really upsets you, it really has got you riled up. If you allow yourself to first get out of the emotion, and by the way, one of the ways to do that is, and I still can't do this properly, but anyway, is to say in your head your cell phone number backwards. It's almost guaranteed you to take you out of that space of triggered that you were in, okay? And once you've done that, once you're clear of it, then you can start, the second time it's really good to reflect on the emotion is to then plan your action for what you want to actually do. And so you may need to go and still have that conversation with your team member, with your spouse, with your child. And so the second time to be very aware of the emotion is when it's going to empower you to have a better response, to have a very significant response in the lives of the people that you influence, lead, connect with, relate to, team with. All of that is really, really important. The final thing that we're going to look at is how do we actually leverage? How do we really work with these emotions? How can we leverage the power of our emotions? And I've got three main points I'm going to be covering here, and I hope this is going to be quite informative and useful for you. So the first one is we can leverage the power of our emotions by listening to them. We could be paying attention. We probably have a backlog of unheard emotions. They're all telling an important story. We need to learn their language. We need to learn their nuances. Anger is not the same as frustration. When is it one? When is it the other? What are the nuances? What is the information that they're providing? And how is that information helpful? So listening to our emotions is an incredible step forward in terms of leveraging the power of our emotions. The second one is speak them, give them a voice. Now, there are going to be some provisos in this one. Road rage is not a good example. So let's have a look at how can we speak our emotions? How can we give them a voice? Well, most people are pretty unskilled in the language of emotions. And so we need to get more skilled in being able to describe emotions and in being able to talk about emotions. We need to build our emotional resilient community, because not all of these things are appropriate to share all over the place. individual relationships. There may be one particular person where you can share most of this. There may be other people where there are certain specific things you can share with them. But it's all about building an emotionally resilient community. And we need to become masters of describing our emotions in that community and encourage others to then share their emotions. And so this emotional resilient community is a place where we can give voice safely, safely within degrees, because it's never going to feel completely safe. But we can have some safety in the way we can express our emotions. And my final tip in terms of how can we leverage the power of emotions is actually going to go just a little step deeper than I've gone so far. And it's this: feel your emotions. Don't judge them, feel them. So what does that actually mean? It means that we give them our attention. Where are they? Am I experiencing a place in the body? This one last night was just above my solar plexus in my chest. That's where I felt it. And then, is there a movement? Well, this one was pounding. It was kind of throbbing. And then every now and then it sort of felt like it was jumping to my throat. That was really good information. Then, does it have a color or a size? Now, this one last night was pretty black, kind of a dark brown black color. And it was actually quite small, but incredibly intense, like a tightness to it. And then, what do they do when you pay attention to them? And this is where it gets interesting. Because almost without fail, when I've paid attention to an emotion, the emotion has diminished. It's got less and less and less and less. And this is where we've got stored up emotions. When we pay them our full attention, when we're consciously aware of them, they actually are getting expressed. And as they're getting expressed, we are getting released and healed from those emotions. And so feel them, don't judge them, give them your attention, and it's going to free something up for you. All right, I see it's almost time, but I've got one last little poll come word cloud that I want to do with you. So back onto AHA slides, and this one is going to be just to build up a word cloud from what stands out for you. So which words or phrases stood out for you during this session now? Which words or phrases? In other words, what are some takeaways for you that really resonated with you or that stood out for you? And here you can put a bunch in. You're not limited here in which words. And by the way, if you choose multiple people choose the same word, that word then gets bigger on the screen. So feel free to put in as many as you like. Which words or phrases stood out for you during this emotional resilience, leveraging emotions session that we've just done? Oh, interesting. Validate and invalidate come up. Nice. Very good. And you're welcome to repeat any words you see on screen that resonate with you. You're welcome to type them in again. Thank you. It's normal. I love it. Validate, resilience, express, feel. Nice words here. Listen. Right. Very good. Very good. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody.